Hello everyone. My name is Farah Al-Shami. I'm a senior fellow and the Social Protection Program Director at the Arab Reform Initiative. Thank you very much for joining us today. I am pleased to be moderating this webinar, which is very momentous actually, because in this webinar, we are officially launching the campaign, our campaign ahead of the annual meetings, ahead of the IMF and World Bank annual meetings happening this year in Marrakesh. We're launching our global campaign on universal social security. The motto of our campaign is social security for all, which is basically, we see it as a key pillar for a new eco-social contract. This campaign is led by pioneers, by leading CSOs and experts that are working on the topic, that are working to promote universal social security as a human right. I'm going to name a few. I'm going to name the Human Rights Watch that is driving forth here, Oxfam, the Development Pathways, ITUC, Amnesty, among many others. This is just to name a few. And we are launching our campaign basically before the annuals because international financial institutions, particularly the IMF and the World Bank, have been playing a crucial role on this level and have been impacting social protection policies and programming to a large extent with their approach, with their approach to financing development, as well as with the programs that they're directly implementing in different parts of the world. So to summarize their impact, they're basically shrinking fiscal spaces, limiting public and social spending, they're promoting austerity, imposing conditionalities that are hindering alternatives, they're driving countries into debt traps, they're enforcing detrimental credit risk management, they're privatizing social insurance, whether be it pension, be it health insurance, and they're developing and implementing sometimes poverty-targeted safety nets, and they're promoting this approach among many other notorious practices. So basically, it is indeed about time, and it is very timely that we are launching our campaign today. We work to promote universal social security more broadly, but we found out that the annuals can be an opportunity actually to officially launch our campaign. And we have with us Dr. Isabel Ortiz, who will later in this session provide much more detail about this campaign. What is it about? Why is it important? And why? What is it exactly for? To kickstart basically this webinar, and without further ado, I'd like to mention that we have, to begin with, 4 very distinguished speakers who have kindly agreed actually and accepted to provide global testimonies on the challenges of poverty targeting and on pension privatization, particularly as 2 key attention points and 2 key focus areas that we have identified in our campaign. We have with us Alana Kembabazi, sorry if I'm pronouncing any name inaccurately, from the ISER in Uganda. We have with us Sarella Emmanuel from the Feminist Collective for Economic Justice in Colombo, Sri Lanka. We have with us Guillermo Zuccotti from the CGT in Argentina. And we have Manuel Riesco from Senda Foundation in Chile. So to begin with, I'm gonna ask a question to all 4 speakers, and I would like you all 4 to come in and to share your testimonies with us. Just so that you can introduce yourself, you can introduce your context. Basically, let us know who you are, what you do. How does your work make you concerned about issues of pension privatization? Especially, this is applicable to the case of Guillermo and Manuel, and to the issue of poverty targeting in the case of Alana and Sarella. How does your work make you concerned about these issues and make you interact with these issues in the sense of how your work is making these issues relevant to you and of great concern? Perhaps, Alana, can you come in and just let us know more about yourself and about that, please?
Yes, I'm with the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights. We work, we're based in Uganda, and we monitor social and economic rights in Uganda, in Africa, and have been particularly concerned. Our approach to social security is one actually of social protection, because we do recognize in the African, I'm speaking to Africans maybe on the call, I know social security will sound like, unemployment benefits and so forth, but it's broader. And we have been very involved in pushing for a human rights-based approach to social protection, including pushing for the development of the protocol that the African Commission put out, which I think is fantastic. You all should read. But getting back to poverty targeting and why it concerns us. One of the things we saw with COVID-19, we always knew this, but I think COVID-19 made it clear, is that vulnerability is on a sliding scale. Today you're fine, and you just have one little shock. So I'll give you an example. Most of our population is in the informal sector. It doesn't mean that they are poor. They could be clearing millions of money every single day. They're just sort of outside the traditional, formal sector of employment. And one of my sisters-in-law during COVID-19 she had a shop, they clear loads of money, but the president, an hour before we had a curfew, an hour before the curfew announced to have a 40-day or so lockdown when we had the Delta surge. And suddenly she could not access money. She could not sell goods. I mean, it was a proper lockdown, shops, like everything. And so this person who has no problem paying her fees and maintaining whatever it is she needs for her household suddenly was there and would have been among the people that actually need support. So during COVID-19, they said, okay, given the abruptness of the lockdown, I and the rest of us, a couple of society were campaigning, they said they would do cash transfers, but they decided that they would target them. And we say it's not going to make sense in our context. One, we have people who are vulnerable who would not necessarily be vulnerable. But number two, we have a huge informal sector workforce. It's particularly, and those in particular have very little social protection. And there's also no way for you to actually track the data, which means your data is going to be prone to error. But they persisted. And what did we see? When they start rolling out the program, those who needed money actually didn't get it. And those who had relatives and who could somehow get yourself onto the list got the money. And because again of poverty targeting, they under budget how much is actually needed. One of the things we say to them was, listen, this is a crisis. We would suggest that anyone who is not a salaried employee right now, because you already have the data, we would suggest you support them. And they said, well, where will we get the money from? And I said, but it's a crisis. You are getting money from donors on how to respond to COVID-19. It's really a matter of prioritization. We could think about, again, all of the issues, and I'll get into the issues that come with financing these services, because I think part of the things that our governments used to justify, and what the IMF and World Bank and the rest, the World Bank in particular, used to justify is again the idea that they must be poverty targeting. But what we have seen in our context is, one, it just leaves out people. It doesn't recognize the multiple vulnerabilities you face. And it also makes the government lazy from doing the necessary hard work to make sure there are fiscal resources for comprehensive social protection. If you think about social protection as a contract you have between your government and you, where I pay taxes or you restrict my freedom of movement like they did during COVID-19, but you are going to take care of me. A government that never has to get into that and only thinks about bits for the poor.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We have more time to speak about that and to hear from you, but I'm going to have to move to our next speaker, who's Sarella, who also has a lot to say about poverty targeting. She works on that. She has experience with that. So Sarella, if you could please also introduce yourself and your work, and we can go back later to Alana to hear more from her about that and have her continue.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm part of this informal feminist collective called the Feminist Collective for Economic Justice. We are an informal group of economists, activists, researchers, and people working on the ground who came together to provide, firstly, a perspective on the impact of the economic crisis and the recovery on women, and secondly, to provide a feminist critical voice in this space. I'm actually not in Colombo. I am in Batticaloa, which is in the east of the island. And just to say, we work very closely with rural women in rural economies, and which are informal and extremely precarious. And more importantly for us, we have survived 3 decades of a war. And these are economies that have been devastated because of the conflict. due to multiple displacements, loss, enforced disappearance, sexual violence, etc. So anyway, our communities we live and work in have been struggling over many decades, and it's in that context that we are now facing the economic crisis. And I think for us, since the end of the war in 2009, we have been demanding for universal social security as the only way to also address the concerns for truth and justice as a form of reparations, but also the only way to help war-torn economies to recover. Currently, in the post-war context, there's been rising indebtedness. You spoke about indebtedness as well, but even at the household level, families are unable to cope, and they are working and living in precarious economies. And in this context, to have targeted so-called scientific social security schemes, or even undoing and rolling back existing social security schemes, I would say is almost criminal. So, and we are seeing it in an everyday sense. I can give more examples as our discussion continues. I will leave it here for now. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So thank you so much, Alana and Sarella, for providing this succinct snapshot of what poverty targeting is and how it is manifesting on the ground in indeed two different contexts. Now, pension privatization is also a real issue, a serious issue that is going on, and there is a lot to be said on that. And we have with us Guillermo Zuccotti, who has kindly agreed to come in and share his experience, perspective, but also, most importantly, introduce himself.
Muchas gracias, Sara y Farai, y buenos días, buenas tardes y buenas noches para todos. Bueno, yo soy Guillermo Zuccotti, tengo formación en economía, trabajo en los equipos de la Secretaría de Relaciones Internacionales de la CGT, la central sindical más importante de la Argentina, y me ocupo de los temas de seguridad social desde hace muchísimos años. No lo digo por una cuestión de coquetería, para no develar mi edad, pero muchísimos años hace que trabajo en estos temas, y me imagino que cualquier argentino es convocado a esta instancia, a este seminario, un poco por la experiencia de la Argentina en materia de la privatización de los sistemas de seguridad social, de pensiones en particular. Yo soy un testigo y un protagonista de esa experiencia durante los años 90, y la trágica vinculación con los organismos multilaterales financieros, como en particular el FMI, y también, por supuesto, el Banco Mundial. Pasamos de las recetas de austeridad y de privatización de los sistemas a hacer un mea culpa en el caso del Banco Mundial para revisar la incapacidad de poder extender la cobertura de seguridad social en países donde la pobreza se creció exponencialmente a causa de las recetas justamente del Fondo Monetario Internacional. Estamos asistiendo hoy a una situación muy crítica donde el rebrote de las derechas, en particular del libertarianismo, en el caso de la Argentina, vuelve a proponer las recetas de privatización de los sistemas de pensiones, con unos niveles de pensiones en términos reales de los más bajos de la historia que registra la historia económica en nuestro país, con un 40% de pobreza. La receta termina siendo privatizar en aquellos sectores de altos ingresos donde se puede autofinanciar una pensión, excluyendo justamente a los que más necesitan de los sistemas. No estamos asistiendo a modelos de seguridad social, justamente porque la seguridad social tiene un carácter redistributivo en materia de ingresos. No se concibe la seguridad social como un autoaseguramiento. Para eso está la capacidad de ahorro que tienen las personas para afrontar a determinadas circunstancias de la vida. Cuando hablamos de contingencias sociales, en particular de la seguridad social, tenemos que entender el rol redistributivo de los estados y la necesidad de dar respuesta justamente como aliviadores de los procesos de pobreza.
Yes.
Hoy
Yes.
estamos muy preocupados, secretaria. Sé que
Pardon.
pasaremos a una segunda ronda. Me quedo por acá entonces.
Sí, okay, gracias. I don't speak Spanish, unfortunately, but I could hear the last word saying that we could probably continue later. So with you, Guillermo. So thank you so much, actually, for this take, for providing this important take and testimony. Actually, it is good to see that not only international financial institutions are harming progress towards or the progress for the realization of universal social security, but they're also impacting social security or in social protection policy more directly in a more direct way. We have our fourth speaker with us who can add to that, who can add to what Guillermo has, where Guillermo has left off, who's Manuel Riesco. Manuel, would you please come in and share your thoughts with us? Yes, you just need to unmute yourself. You're still muted. Yes.
Thanks for this invitation and congratulations for this initiative. For us, it is a great occasion to present to you yet another mass campaign that we are starting these days to deprivatize the Chilean pension system. That is an important part of what we have been doing at Senda, together with similar organizations and the workers' movement for over a quarter century as an institution. And I am afraid quite a bit longer in the case of some of us. Unfortunately, the Chilean democratic system recovered 3 decades ago after the massive popular rebellion that in the 1980s confronted the Pinochet dictatorship. This democratic system has not been able so far to put an end to the gigantic abuse that its privatization has meant. I must add that successive reforms, including the one currently being discussed in Parliament, have not done much to deprivatize the pension system. Rather, on the contrary, they have maintained and unsuccessfully until now attempted to increase the diversion of social security contributions to forced savings in the financial system. The accumulated amount there already finances 70% of all loans obtained by all companies in the country, 1/5 of the stock market value of the largest companies, and 10% of the bank loans. On the other hand, these reforms have substantially increased the fiscal subsidies that have financed 60% of the cost of all the pensions paid by the privatized system since its creation 4 decades ago. If remaining pensions from the old public system, the non-contributory and the military pensions are added to these subsidies, the National Treasury financed 87% of national spending on pensions in the month of July 2023. While the privatized system contributed the 13% remaining with less than 1/5 of the current contributions it collected. In other words, the accumulated pension funds has never financed any pension whatsoever in 4 decades. Meanwhile, the Treasury must allocate 1/5 of its budget, already diminished by the diversion of the pension contributions to the financial industry for this purpose, an expense that increases year after year. All this in the name of financial responsibility.
Yes, I hate to cut people off, but I'd like to hear more from you actually. And now let's go to our second question and let's hear more from you, Manuel, about your work. What is it that you have been doing to address that, to voice out, to basically advocate against this status quo that you've been describing? Yes, Manuel, if we can hear more from you about your work and what you're doing to basically combat that.
I think when in the next question I may answer that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from you now, actually, because in the second question we're doing the reverse order, and so
okay.
Yeah, I know it's not that you're taking any time from other colleagues. This is
okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, to put an end to this irrationality and abuse, we have started yet another national campaign led by the so-called No Más AFP workers movement, which has mobilized millions of people, and the municipal governments. They lead this new campaign. And we plan to gather millions of signatures to demand that national political authorities authorize all the people currently affiliated to the private pension system, which include almost the entire working age population and half of the retired people. The campaign is to authorize them to voluntarily switch to the old public system that still exists, transferring their past and future contributions there and withdrawing the balance of their pension savings. The benefits of such measures, which everyone understands and the overwhelming majority of the population supports, the benefits for the working people, both active and retired, the fiscal accounts, and the indebtedness of the state, the country's economy, and the legitimacy of the democratic system today, lost to a dangerous degree, these benefits are definitive. The privatization of pensions is one of the main causes of the ever-increasing popular indignation regarding the political system as a whole, which exploded in October 10, 2019, and manifested itself in ensuing 18 national elections, COVID in between, and will probably express itself again in yet another rejection of the proposal of the political system this December. Interesting times we are living through in Chile, again, I should say, as a member of a generation that is a veteran from 3 revolutions, including the one history will write with a capital letter R, and humanity respects and admires in the figure of its leader, President Salvador Allende, immolated half a century ago in the flames of the La Moneda Palace for the sake of the loyalty of his people.
Thank you so much, Manuel, for this and for bringing the historical overview into your. Thanks a lot. And by the way, 2019 also marks the outbreak of the financial crisis in Lebanon, and we have never had this system, but we had end of service indemnities, and this is when the Lebanese people had also, at the same time as the revolution in Chile, had realized that they had lost their end of service indemnities and their life savings. So we share the same struggles and sufferings, unfortunately. Guillermo, we would like to hear more from you about pension privatization. Let's stay with that, and then we'll hear from the ladies about their experience with poverty targeting. Please tell us more details about the context that you are living in when it comes to that and your work on this level.
Casi en todo lo que describió recién Manuel, básicamente porque el modelo instaurado de privatizaciones de los sistemas previsionales en Latinoamérica fueron un poco la copia del sistema chileno instaurado en el 81. En el caso de Argentina, en los años 90, con alguna particularidad porque el sistema argentino técnicamente no es sustitutivo, sino que es complementario. Era un sistema básico público de reparto y un sistema de capitalización, un pilar de capitalización. Pero quiero decir esto, en cualquier caso, es tan grave el sistema sustitutivo como el sistema complementario. ¿Por qué? Y voy a explicar brevemente, voy a tratar pero me parece muy ejemplificador para evitar estas trampas. Con un sistema sustitutivo está claro que el sistema es privado y ya, al que le toca y al que no, paciencia, decimos por acá, para ser educados. Pero en el caso del sistema complementario hay una pequeña trampa, porque el sistema público termina subsidiando al sistema privado que no termina de dar prestaciones útiles, porque el sistema es de beneficio, pasa de ser de beneficio hacer una cotización cierta. Entonces hay un problema, que es que al aumento de las pensiones, porque necesitan cubrir el costo de vida, obligatoriamente el Estado tiene que salvaguardar el poder adquisitivo de esas pensiones. Entonces se ve obligado a aumentar estas pensiones, y como los beneficios son crecientes, pero la contribución está fija, los sistemas privados no pueden dar respuesta a estos sistemas de actualización. Y agrego otra cuestión: el robo puro y duro de las comisiones de las administradoras de fondos de pensiones. Digo el robo, porque en el caso de Argentina, las contribuciones patronales bajaron al 50% de la capacidad contributiva, pero las comisiones privadas de las aseguradoras no bajaron, con lo cual las comisiones de las aseguradoras llegaron a ser hasta el 50% de la contribución de los trabajadores, que en el caso de no tener capacidad contributiva para acceder a una pensión mínima, que fue gran parte de los trabajadores de bajos ingresos, esas aportes y contribuciones de esos trabajadores caían en saco roto, esto es, no había capacidad de poder reclamar por parte de esos trabajadores una pensión en el futuro. Entonces, a esta estafa probada y comprobada, que el propio Banco Mundial tuvo que reconocer las asimetrías que había al interno de los colectivos, queremos volver como una rémora a estos sistemas. Por lo menos en la Argentina quieren reprivatizar algunos candidatos en esta elección, de la mano de los organismos de crédito internacional, que lo único que siempre suelen proponernos es austeridad fiscal para contraer la economía, una devaluación que en nuestras economías por los commodities es letal para el nivel de actividad económica, y terminan financiándolo los pobres esto. Porque los que tienen capacidad de ahorro en moneda fuerte fugan esos capitales a economías de opacidad fiscal.
Guillermo, it's very hard to resist not to keep listening, actually. Very interesting. And we're seeing how the states are sometimes being puppets and sometimes being a projection of this whole neoliberal model. Let's go back to poverty targeting, and let's hear from Sarala about more details about her context and basically the struggle to phase out existing poverty targeting programs and to try to stop developing new ones. And we'll get back to you all during the Q&A.
I'm just going to share 3 slides very quickly to show you the impact. So this is a comparison of a study that has been done by Learn Asia this year. As you can see, the poverty levels, 4 million people have fallen into poverty this year. And it's high in the rural economies where I am from. I work in up to 30%. And this is our island. As you can see, there's increases of poverty in all the districts of the island. But in certain areas like the plantation sector and the north and east of the island, you see a marked increase because, like I explained earlier, these are communities also surviving 3 decades of a war. And in terms of the social security schemes, this shows the gross inadequacy of the targeting. The Samurdhi, which is the social welfare scheme, covers only 32% of those who are eligible. And I would like to point out the the allowance for people living with disabilities, because it's particularly important for us in the North and East, as there are many households with people living with disabilities in the post-war context. The scheme only covers 1%. As I said, the targeting schemes have been really inadequate. So the scheme was Samurdhi, which was anyway specific, targeted, and not covering everybody. And that scheme has been changed with a lot of backing and influence by the World Bank to a new scheme called Aswesuma. It was touted to be a better scheme because it was more efficient and scientific, but the administrative chaos of implementing it was borne by poor households. Secondly, we don't know what the impact is on people's savings, because the social security schemes, people had savings which they were eligible for when they were above 70 years. Now that they're off the scheme, there's no clarity about what happens to that money. Thirdly, these schemes are designed in extremely patriarchal ways. The household is the unit for assistance. So women in the households are always, there are gendered impacts of that. If there is an able-bodied man, for example, even if the woman has a disability, she's not eligible because the assumption is that the man will look after her. And of course, the assessment systems are always, has been asset-based, it's looking at assets. So almost penalizing for hardworking, poor, working class people for having assets. So this has been some of the experiences. And I would like to end with saying that for many of the communities we work with, it's not about the money. The money is, of course, not enough to live or to meet your everyday needs. Social security is about, it's a contract. It's a significant manifestation of the contract between the citizen and the state. It's your base of entitlements for your political rights, for being your entitlements in the moments of crisis, and the kind of the basis on which you demand that the state is responsible to look after those who are hit worst by economic crisis. And the unfortunate thing is this is not only are you surviving an economic crisis, you are even worse affected and almost penalized by the so-called recovery measures and austerity measures. So I can give more examples when we continue the conversation.
Yes.
These are my points.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And social security being a human right and part of the social contract is exactly what our campaign is trying to promote, to advance. Thank you so much. And thank you for the striking figures, by the way, very interesting. Alana, back to you to hear more from you and your context, please, about your context, actually.
Yeah, it's not just in Uganda, I think across the African context, one of the things that our governments are grappling with is knowing that the people need comprehensive social protection, but they're being advised, one, to target it, which is not popular. So for example, we've taken them to court over excluding those without national IDs, excluding certain older persons just because they've raised the age higher, all of those, and everyone actually needs it. And at the same time, they're grappling with a bad policy advice of targeting, but also finding that their hands are tied from the fiscal consolidation measures and austerity measures that the IMF has been imposing on them. And for many of our governments, because we are facing some of our highest debt levels, just I think across the continent, we really seem to be at the mercy of what the policy advice is. So you're telling us that social protection is good, invest in it, but you're telling us, no, actually, cut budgets, cut, public wage bills. This is too much, which means you're cutting programs for the youth, the life. You're giving us like a skeleton version of social protection. And I think it's a very tough conundrum because there's a rising tide across Africa that just life is very unaffordable right now, the cost of living crisis, climate change. People don't think about the links with climate change. The fact that, we're not getting our food. We never used to be food insecure, but now we are because the rains are coming on a different schedule and they're not being. So people are up in arms. And I think it's very important that people begin to rise up and question this. And it should come from all segments of society, right? From the rural poor, the vulnerable, to academia, or civil society, while we're regurgitating the same policy advice that we know is not working for our people. And why are we separating? Sometimes they talk about social security and they think about maybe a cash transfer here, and they won't think about the fact that it is linked to whether you get public health services or public education services, and that you should be demanding for more as a people. And I think that the lip service of social protection can't cut it anymore. The idea that the IMF, for example, has social spending flows, and most times they're not defined, but in our context, they actually say increasing spending on health, education, social protection. So I commend them for actually stating other categories. But there is no real commitment to this. When before the next tranche of funds, they actually saw the government had not met the social spending flows. And they were like, well, here is the money anyway. But even then, they do very little to mitigate the austerity that you're insisting on, the targeting. And so I think it's very important that we begin to really think about what works for people. And I've been very lucky to just hear from so many colleagues across the world now, particularly pension privatization, because I think that may be the next frontier for us as well. It's slowly creeping in. And to be able to start and begin to organize ourselves as people, because if we don't begin to define what it is we say we need when we say social protection, someone else is defining it for us. Donors are defining it for us. Those who are keen to capture in on the privatization on it are defining it for us. And our government officials, who will be fine, most of them, regardless, because they can fly abroad for healthcare, they will be getting their, retirement benefits. They will not be are going to be fine. So I think it's very important that this fight is taken back to the people. ISA has been running a campaign to reclaim public services, and social protection is one of them. On the African continent, and what we're saying is, if we don't stand up now, then who is coming? We need to define this, and we need to make sure that governments, funders, IFI, all of that are paying attention to what it is we need. And we need comprehensive social protection, because ultimately the goal is for people to be able to live in dignity, not bare minimums.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Alana. And you brought up the issue of climate change, and we're all seeing the safeguarding mechanisms by the World Bank, how tangential and short-sighted they are. Thank you all for these great insights and illuminations. We now have a very short time for a short Q&A, like a 10-minute Q&A. I'm sure everybody would like to hear much more from you, from everyone, from all the speakers. So please, if you have any questions to ask to the speakers, if you can just raise your hand. We'll take just one round. Unfortunately, we don't have time to take several rounds of questions, and then we can have the speakers react to the comments and to the solicitations, let's call them. Please feel free to raise your hand if you have any question to the speakers. I'm sure you do, because otherwise, I'm thinking to ask them questions myself, or simply keep the Q&A shorter, because we are already have went past the time that is allotted for this particular segment of the session. And we could probably move to learn more from Dr. Ortiz about the campaign. But I'm going to give you some time to see if anyone has a question to raise, a comment, some additions. Okay. Are you sure you don't have questions? Because it was super interesting. Super. Yes, Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thank you for this campaign. I just have a quick question. I work a lot with the UN and with these international institutions, and I'm just curious to know what would be your recommendation to these agencies on how to engage more with civil society on social protection and social security issues. Because I think that apart from the usual trade unions, there are very limited occurrences of these engagement forums. And I feel that we should be now in a position to recommend for more of these types of engagements. So I'd like to hear from you how that could be done. Over.
Thanks, Sarah. Do you have any other questions? Yes, Priscilla, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for all the presentations, very insightful. Mine again would also just be a request for clarification on how best we can get governments to be interested in funding fully social security, social protection, grants or whatever governments may be having. How do we get them to be interested in funding fully these activities? Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Who else would like to come in? I'm going to still take a couple of questions. So, yeah, Malavika, yes.
Yes, thank you so much. And I think the sort of the reluctance is because I think all of us have so many questions for these brilliant presentations, and then it's hard to pick and choose one. But for me, I think one big question is, and this is something that we as Amnesty are also working on, is the role of automation in the delivery of social protection systems. And if I don't know whether Sarla or Lana, Guillermo, Manuel, if you have any sort of insights on how this automation or technology is sort of working to, what kind of a role it plays in your particular country context, it would be great to hear. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Malavika. And the last question goes to who would like to come in. We still have just like one slot, and that's precious. Otherwise, we can just stick to these 3 questions because we're really tight on time. So if nobody raises their hand right now. Okay, so let's have our speakers respond. And I'm going to go by alphabetical order this time. I'm going to start with Alana. Alana, please, your reactions to these questions. And of course, I mean, they'd like to hear more from you. So.
Yes, thank you. The first speaker was asking how to engage more beyond trade unions. One, I think there are lots of civil society organizations, either, for example, works with grassroots groups as well. And so we're sometimes representing a different constituency. We're not necessarily looking at those who are sort of, for example, formerly employed or so forth, right? So I encourage that broader consultation to happen with women groups. You can look about women market associations that are often there. So I think thinking through the different categories to have a more holistic sense of what is happening. I think part of the challenge with social protection is it's defined very much by who is sitting around the table. And that is why for so long, the informal sector was not even thought about, because for those who are defining a lot of what it was, it took them a while to realize that in some of our society, you're more likely to be informal than part of the formal sector. And then someone talked about the role of technology and some of those systems that are automated in social protection. I think they can be really problematic. I've seen, for example, the use of digital ID in my country, where you have to have a national ID to receive social protection for older persons, for example. So the system doesn't care if you are 82 in practice. If the digital ID has, wrong information, which was the case, and we actually are still helping people, we even have a case against government of this. If it has you 20 years young, even if you look like you're bent, like all of that, you will not get your money. If you don't have it, you will not get your money. And that has been one of the biggest barriers, right? Because you're not able, by automating so many systems and using digital IDs and so forth, and tying them as conditions to receive social protection and other public services. You're excluding, in my country, millions of people don't have digital ID, so excluding millions of people that need them. But you're also reducing the participation of the local government officials and those who would actually know the benefit, would know the beneficiaries and can give you context and could even give you feedback on how this works. So for me, it is just definitely a traffic light. I think for one, they shouldn't be mandated as a precursor to receiving social protection. And then I think that the challenges with rolling them out and so forth should be carefully looked into and to make sure that there is no exclusion that is happening. I can't recall the third question.
Thanks, Alana. Can you wrap up? Yes, please.
Yes, I was going to say, I think for me, my parting shot is that I'm really glad that we are launching our campaign today. And I hope all of you join it. Someone asked, I remember the last question, someone asked about how we make sure that it's financed. You need the people shouting about it. It's how we got cash transfers to be in a pandemic. It had not been done before, right? In terms of cash transfers, give out rapid support. So I think that if you get people shouting about it, because questions of resources and who benefits from them are definitely are political. And who moves our leaders, which is the people saying that. Because you can do all the analysis, and I think depending on where you are, we should do the analysis. We should show that our governments can and have the money, and they must do so. Their legal obligations, and they also are able to do so. So both the lawyers and the economic experts and the rest of us could do all of that analysis. But you need to get everyday people, because they have a vested interest in this, actually demanding for it as a right.
Thanks, Alana. Manuel, very excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. First of all, regarding international institutions, they have always helped a lot towards progressive social policies. But I'm afraid, I must say, that in the case of pensions in Chile, the last 3 governments have presented reform proposals. The first 2 failed, and the current one is failing. So let's say they were not approved, these proposals. And I must say, the main reason is because they sort of increased public spending and maintained or increased social contributions being diverted to the financial markets. The trouble is that the local ILO office sort of lent its authority to these 3 proposals. And that was not exactly of much help. Well, in the case of the following questions, what I would like to say is that the best way to understand the magnitude of this abuse, I mean, deviating contributions to the financial markets, is the following: is to understand what are the benefits of a voluntary change, massive change to the old system. What are these benefits? Pensioners will increase their pensions, doubling them twice. That's for pensioners. People who are working and contributing to the system, and now will contribute to the public system, they will maintain their contributions, not increase them, as the projects in discussion propose. And they will be able to withdraw about 2/3 of the current fund. And the current fund is presently, look, the best way to understand its magnitude is to tell you that the fund is the equivalent of 40 years of pensions. That's the amount they have diverted to the financial markets. 40 years of pensions. Well, 2/3 of that, people will be able to withdraw it. And that is a reparation for the abuse of all these years.
Yeah.
And the fiscal sector, well, it recovers the contributions. Its income, overall income, increased by 1/5. And the overall debt of the state is reduced in 1/3, with the other third of the fund that people will give back to the state. Because the state during 40 years has been indebting itself with the pension system to pay for the subsidies of pensions. And 2/3 of the current debt of the state is with the pension system.
Yep.
So if it recovers this part of the pension fund, this debt will be eliminated, and
Very clear, Manuel.
etc. Well, I'm sorry.
No worries. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, very enlightening. Guillermo, I'm sure you have things to add, and if you can please keep it short so that we can talk more about the campaign and the whole movement, basically. And if Guillermo is not ready to come, oh yeah, we can't hear you. Go ahead.
Me gustaría terminar con algunas preguntas que tranquilamente nos podemos hacer todos después de escuchar este enriquecedor debate o conversatorio. Que es, en primer lugar, pensar si privatizar la seguridad social o los sistemas de pensiones es, independientemente de las opiniones que cada uno de nosotros podamos tener, si puede ser útil para economías y para sociedades que tienen el 40% como mínimo de trabajo informal, sin cotización, si puede ser útil para niveles de ingreso pulverizados producto de las crisis económicas post-pandemia, si podemos hablar del mismo concepto de seguridad social antes y después de la pandemia, porque el concepto de contingencia social cambió abruptamente. Toda la previsión, lo que podíamos entender como previsión, cambió de un plumazo ante la realidad del COVID-19. Estas preguntas obviamente no tienen, en mi opinión, respuesta desde la privatización del sistema, desde la cancelación del Estado. Ahora, tenemos que decir también, con el mismo énfasis, que no podemos asistir a un Estado bobo o a un Estado inútil, sin herramientas de política pública. Tenemos que entender que los estados tienen que fortalecerse y los actores sociales tienen que involucrarse en este proceso, porque no es indiferente hacer política pública que no hacerla, porque el no hacerla es dejar en manos del Estado, del mercado, decisiones que son de política pública, que importan al derecho humano de las personas de tener seguridad social o no tenerla. Entonces, es muy importante que los estados sean solventes financieramente, que no regalen los fondos que son, en el caso de las pensiones, en promedio, en algunas sociedades más o en otras menos, pero es el 60% del gasto social. Entonces, no estamos hablando de un elemento anexo o accesorio. Estamos hablando, en realidad, de la capacidad que tienen los estados de fortalecerse. Entonces, me parece que es necesario involucrarse mucho más el auge de las nuevas tecnologías interpela a los modelos de seguridad social tradicionales. No podemos estar hablando solamente de contribuciones como si guardáramos los fondos en reserva en una cajita de seguridad para cuando seamos viejitos. Ha cambiado todo eso. Ese concepto ha cambiado. Hay que pensar en sociedades que redistribuyen ingresos y que aplican esos ingresos a las personas que lo necesitan.
Thank you so much, Guillermo. It's, again, very hard to resist this passion and the excitement. Sarella, if you can take a minute to just reflect on, on the questions and comment.
Yeah, I just want to make 3 points. The first one about what can the UN do, or governments, what can we ask of our governments? I think we need to not only be asking of our governments, but governments who are also, for example, in Sri Lanka's context, where we are in debt, the countries that hold the debt. We need to speak to those governments as well. And I think we cannot talk about universal social security without talking about debt justice, debt injustice, and debt cancellation. So we need to bring that language in to hold global systems accountable. About the UN, I think there is no consensus on their position on social security for sure. UNICEF, I know, has been one of the UN bodies that has been asking for universal social security consistently. ILO, like Manuel said, I don't know ILO's role in terms of supporting some of the very problematic labor reforms, particularly affecting women, and UN Women, the other UN bodies. I don't know where their stand is in relation to universal social security. So conversations between UN bodies to get them on board is really important. The last one about technology, I think for us, for sure, and I'm sure for many of you here, we are not living in democratic states. We are living in contexts where there's authoritarian states. And in that context, technology becomes something that can be used against citizens. And in our experience of looking at the transformation from Samurdhi to Aswasuma, so much information was collected, so much data was collected. And because it was called social security information, because it was tied to some kind of assistance in a moment of crisis, there wasn't at all a strong voice questioning this process of accumulating people's very, very personal information about their households, about their finances, actual kind of documentation, etc. So we do have a question in Sri Lanka, for example. We just passed a quite problematic terrorism law. There are laws being brought in to control freedom on the internet, etc. In that context, the power we have given our states with technology to collect data, so much data about us, we need to start questioning these things, and the efficiency argument doesn't fly. What will this information and data be used? How will it be used against particular communities whenever the state wants to, right? So that would be my response. So yes, it is extremely worrying, and I would second Elena's point about it completely takes away the human relationships between local government officials and those who are really in need of social security when you just make it into a very far kind of online process with a QR code, and you don't know where to go or who to speak to if there is a problem. So these are all like issues around how the technology has been used. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for this. And many dimensions actually have been covered. Now let's move to Dr. Isabel Ortiz to hear more from her about the campaign, how important it is, why is it important, and what is it all about. Dr. Isabel has been driving force in this campaign, and we're very excited to hear from you. So the floor is yours, and we're all ears.
Thank you very much, Farah. Please call me Isabel. Well, social security is a neglected human right. Everybody talks about the right to education, the right to health, the right to work, but very few talk about the right to social security yet. Social security is essential for our life in dignity. Social security was started at the time of other large public problems in the 19th century, like public education and public health. And it became clear that jobs alone cannot sustain people, as not everybody can work. People grow old and cannot work. Some people have accidents or disabilities and are unable to work. Children should not work. During maternity, it's very hard for parents to work, and some people lose their jobs or cannot find one. This is why Social Security was born, and all these reasons apply today. And I would like to show you this evolution on how it happened with a little set of things. If I can share my screen and you allow me with one single slide. Here it is. Okay. So what you have here is a set of maps, global maps, and it shows the extension of Social Security since the 1900s. The first map, as you can see, belongs to 1900, and it just shows a few European countries that have a few schemes. Generally, there were pensions and disability benefits, and it keeps evolving over time. Second map, 1920, then 1940, 1960 big development, and it's very important because actually is when you get the independence of the colonial Africa and Asia, and actually Social Security is in the constitution of most countries. So very important for the right of Social Security. Then the 1980s, it keeps evolving. As you see, the colors become more intense until the last one, which is, past the 2000s and is close to today. Now, what I want you to reflect on these maps is that despite all the negative stories, this is a story of success. Social Security has been evolving over the years, and you can see it's been, implemented. Public programs are being implemented in the different areas, from child and family benefits to old age pensions. They are implemented in a majority of world countries, and is evolving. And our duty is to make all the world map really have bright blue colors. And I want you also to reflect that this campaign is not the result of a few visionary people, opinionated, that have some demands. This is a fight that was started by our parents, by our grandparents, and it's our generational duty to really ensure that everybody is covered effectively by Social Security. So that's what these maps tells us, and it's, I think, a very important issue for the campaign. Now, there are two things that we are really looking here. One is public system coverage, universal for all, and the other is the adequacy of benefits for a life in dignity. Because what we are finding in many of the reforms that are happening today is that people, even in high-income countries, let's say pensioners, are given such tiny pensions that are hardly enough to buy food. So the two issues are public system coverage and the adequacy of benefits. And these are the two issues we fight. So why has Social Security been neglected? Well, Social Security has many enemies, and we heard before the statements. But a big pushback came actually in the 1980s with the debt crisis. And at the time, countries were told by the international financial institutions that they had to do large austerity cuts, really to pay back creditors. Ministry of Finance abandoned long-term development, went against human rights, and started with huge cuts to education, health, Social Security, and all public services. Many were privatized, and in some countries, the Social Security Agency was even closed down, like in Bolivia. And this caused mass social pain and hardship. Infant mortality rates rose, and in many countries, and created social tensions. And it was clear it was a mistake. So what I'm explaining all that is because there are similarities to today, particularly after the post-pandemic times. And what we're finding today is, again, ministries of finance are resorting to a very old, painful formula of austerity cuts and privatization of services, and which is against international standards and is against human rights. So this is the fight that we're having today. And exactly what is it going to be? Okay, so we're finding that these austerity cuts are resulting in targeting social assistance or safety nets, which is a de facto contraction of coverage, meaning if it was covering now this big, it covers less. A lot is cutting of programs for women, families, persons with disabilities, and other, and just leaving extremely targeted safety nets to the poor, or to a percentage of the poor, with a significant number of exclusion errors. Second issue is cutting of social security benefits like pensions. And so much that even the OECD and ILO project increasing old age poverty in higher income countries, let alone in developing countries. And third, and this is a very important point, during the pandemic, actually international financial institutions starting and governments started waiving employers' contributions to social security. And this was a way to give some kind of stimulus to enterprises at a very difficult time. However, the problem is this is at the cost of workers and social security systems. And now, let's remember that the employers' contributions to social security is part of workers' compensation. It belongs to the employees, and it's just a deferred wage that they will get it in time. When they retire or when they need the benefits. So it cannot be that employers are waived these contributions. They need to immediately restore them back and to ensure that social security is sustainable. So these are the three main policies that we're seeing in governments that are doing fiscal consolidation, austerity cuts. However, I want to finish with some good news. And then we have two main good news. First is that the majority of countries that privatize pensions are reversing privatizations and rebuilding public systems, because the privatization of social security does not work. Both Guillermo and Manuel Resco before explained the reasons why, the major failures of pension privatization, but it did increase poverty, inequality, gender disparities, and it's too expensive simply for countries to afford. So that's why the majority of countries that privatize are actually reversing the privatization. And this is extremely well documented in ILO, UN, and others. And second, and this is very good news too, is that all these austerity cuts are not necessary because they are alternatives, that they are feasible even in the poorest countries. There are at least 8 financing options that they are available, and they're known to governments and supported by the IFIs. And if we have national dialogue to ensure that they are enacted, they will avoid all the pain that austerity cuts can provide. And this is also well written, and we don't have time to go them in detail, but let me just explain some of them. The first one will be to increase progressive tax revenues, and that means not consumption taxes like VAT, but on the contrary, wealth and other taxes. And let me give you some examples. Brazil put a small financial transaction tax, and with that expanded social security. Zambia and Bolivia are taxing mineral gas extraction for universal pensions. And Mongolia financed a universal child benefit with a very, very little tax on copper exports. So these are possibilities there. This is a world of washing money. There's a lot of it, and it's about progressive taxation. Second, it will be the traditional way to increase social security financing by adequate employer contributions, not reducing the contributions or waiving them, but actually ensuring that they're adequate, and formalizing workers in the informal economy and with good contracts. And we have very good examples in Uruguay, Argentina, and others earlier times through the monotax and others. Then, as other colleague put it, it's actually important to come with issues of eliminate or restructured debt. And we have very good examples here. More than 60 countries have restructured and reduced debt in recent years. And some of them, for instance, Ecuador, use the debt service to invest in social programs. Then we can fight illicit financial flows that are illegal. We can reallocate public expenditures. And for instance, Thailand to Costa Rica, they use defense expenditures to finance the expansion of social sectors and other alternatives that they are there. So all that to end with a positive note. Now, what happens is that all these very important decisions that affect the lives of millions of people, they cannot be taken behind closed doors at the ministries of finance of a country with the help of a few technocrats of the international financial institutions. Is it essential to have national dialogue, public, with all relevant stakeholders? And by the way, the UN supports that because this is part of good governance. And that will be a way forward to ensure that we get the expansion of social security with adequate benefits. And despite all the all the challenges that we're facing today in this campaign. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is so inspiring, and you did actually provide or give justice, pay justice to the campaign. So thank you so much. I mean, the campaign is a collaborative effort, and it is, I mean, what distinguishes it is that it has got this like flat structure where everybody feels comfortable belonging, partaking in, contributing and collaborating. There are other campaign members here with us that would want to come in and provide their perspective and probably provide closing remarks. So please, campaign members, if you can just raise your hands and come in and provide a closing remark of a minute so that we can wrap up in a 10-minute time maximum. I'll just take, just please raise your hands whenever you feel comfortable coming in. Okay, Gonal, please go ahead.
Hi, just a short message from Scandinavia, from ACT Church of Sweden, and we're really happy to have joined hands with all of you in the campaign. And it's great also that those of us who have been talking about the problems with targeting and about universality, and then also are now joining this debate on pensions, so that we see it from a broader perspective. So thank you very much. And great event today.
Thanks a lot, Gonal. Lena.
Thanks so much. And just to say that Human Rights Watch is really proud to support this important global campaign for Social Security for all. And we hope that all of you can join us moving forward, because we don't see this as a temporary fight, but in fact, it's a long-term endeavor that we're striving for. And one of the issues that we're really pushing against are many of the misconceptions around Social Security, and especially the sense that it's charity, no, because it's not. It's a human right that everybody is entitled to. So thank you so much for all the fantastic testimonies today, and I'm looking forward to working together.
Thank you very much, Lena, and to Human Rights Watch for leading really on this. Beatrice, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Hi everyone, it's very nice to see such a lively discussion. I'm from the ITUC, the International Trade Union Confederation, and we're supporting the campaign because extending social protection is a long-standing priority for the ITUC and the international labor movement as a whole. Social protection is, after all, a fundamental human right, enshrined in numerous human rights instruments and elaborated in international labor standards. And we particularly decided indeed to join forces in this campaign, as we observe at times a lack of coherence between the policy advice of the international financial institutions, the World Bank and the IMF, and the agreed international labor standards, for instance, the ILO Convention on Social Security and the ILO recommendation on social protection floors, but also agreed international commitments to extend social protection as the SDG goal 1.3. There's many reasons why the ITUC is backing this campaign, but just to be very brief, something that I wish to emphasize is that the efforts to strengthen social protection cannot really be disconnected from a broader strategy of promoting decent work. And so these measures can really expand and reinforce the financing base for social protection. So thank you very much. Very glad to see so many exchanges today, and hopefully we can continue and more organizations can join and support the campaign. Thank you, Farah.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. Thank you. Daisy, please go ahead.
Thanks so much, Farah, for your excellent moderation, and thank you to all the speakers. It's been a really fantastic conversation. It's really great to be part of this. Just to quickly add in that Development Pathways is excited about this campaign and is really endorsing it as an important issue, despite the urgent global need for inclusive social security that we see more and more every day. This current over-reliance on a narrow poverty targeted approach, we're seeing it simply not fit for purpose. poverty targeted schemes and this sort of austerity approach, it cannot credibly provide a basis for the progressive realization of inclusive and effective social protection floors, leaving really across low and middle income countries, the vast majority of those living on low and precarious incomes being excluded from social security, while national social contracts have been undermined really as a result of citizens losing trust in their governments, which we've seen globally as well. So really now is the moment for international financial institutions to reflect on the evidence around the ineffectiveness and also the adverse outcomes of a poverty-targeted approach, as well as pension privatization, and get behind national governments to actually support them in progressively building a strong rights-based system of universal life cycle social security that can actually ensure everyone receives protection throughout their life, and build strong social contracts. So thank you. Hopefully this is the start of the conversation. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Daisy. Thank you so much. Wouter, if I pronounced your name correctly.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, we are of course very much in favor of this campaign. We have within the Global Coalition for Social Protection Floors, which now includes about 120 NGOs and trade union organizations all over the world. We have been acting on this for a long time, in particular on the basis of the ILO recommendation 202. One of our plans is that we would like to have a fund for social protection that will in particular support, let's say, low-income countries in order to set up, let's say, their social protection floors and their comprehensive system. So we very much applaud this initiative, and we will wholeheartedly, work together with you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Musa, please go ahead.
Hello, everybody. I'm very glad to be among the distinguished participants. I'm a member of the Global Coalition on Social Protection Floor. As a matter of fact, as you know, Farah, we are in Lebanon joining effort with UNICEF and ILO to establish a kind of national social protection strategy, and we are working very hard nowadays to write this strategy and to approach the Prime Ministry of Lebanon to adopt that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Musa. Before I give the floor to Malavika, so we have in the chat some notes from our colleagues who are really like helping out, gathering more signatories, more endorsements. So Daisy has mentioned that, so we would like to hear more from you as to why you do endorse this campaign. And I'm sure you didn't get the chance to write that in the chat, so I just sent a public Google Doc where you can leave your thoughts. So please take this Google Doc and save it, take the link. Even after we hang up, you can just feel free, take your time and share your thoughts in this document with us as to why you endorse the campaign, why you're interested, what is it that you would like to contribute and to help out with. And there is another link that was shared by Anna to sign the statement, basically to basically just add yourself as a signatory, which will make you join the campaign and join our listserv, our mailing list, whereby where we share our developments, news, announcements, and this is where we also arrange for our meetings and communicate all together. So I just mentioned this now so that people can take some time to look into the chat and take the links. Malavika, sorry to make you wait. Please go ahead.
No. And I've also seen that the interpreters are struggling and probably need a break, but just wanted to say a huge thank you for moderating the session so well. Huge thank you to the interpreters. On behalf of Amnesty International, I just want to say that we are very, very excited to be a part of this campaign. We are sort of developing our work in this area clearly from a human rights perspective to promote the right to social security, and we are very excited to share our work and also learn from this very, expert group of people in this campaign. So I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all, really. Thank you to the organizers, to the campaign members who are basically the organizers. We're all together the organizers. We are 30 minutes past the hour, and the interpreters have also, are also tired. So we do need to hang up. I'm gonna end on one note. We are in countries that have closed policy spaces, that have a lack of political will to change, that have political red lines, complex political economic factors. So the only way to make the desired change and to promote universal social security is to come all together in such a movement, in this campaign and in other campaigns, to join forces, to create the momentum, and to turn all duplications of efforts into basically synergies, collaboration, and partnerships, so that we can make the change that we are all calling for. So thank you for joining us, and please do join our campaign as well, so that we can stay in touch and work all together to achieve the mission that we are all here for. Thank you very much, and apologies for the delay. Take good care, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.